Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Metropolitan Opera Guild's masterclass today. My name is Mackenzie Cole, and I am the Senior Associate of Community Engagement here at the Guild. I just have a few things for us to go over today before we begin this lovely session. The first thing, I just want you all to know that we will be recording this session today, and because of that, we've made it so that your screens and your videos will not be able to be turned on. We do have a Q&A today, and in case you have any questions as we go throughout, we do still want this to be interactive and we want to hear from you. So we do ask that if you have questions, since you can't speak them out loud to us, we ask that you use the Q&A feature of Zoom that you can find at the bottom taskbar. Usually there's two speaking bubbles and it says Q&A. You can use that to type your message and we will be able to see it on our end. Another thing that we recommend you doing today is to utilize the full screen mode of Zoom. If you have the button that says view at the top of your screen, if you're not already in full screen mode, we do suggest that you do that so that you can have the best possible viewing experience today. Also, just with some best practices, so you know, we will be sharing a lot of really wonderful sound today. We've optimized our videos and we are sharing that sound as loud as possible on our end. So you at home can adjust to make it louder, make it softer, however you prefer. But just know that whatever's shared today is as loud as possible as we can get to share to you. And with all of that being said, that is all that I have to go over. I am really pleased to have today's session. We have a wonderful master teacher and some wonderful artists that she has worked with for this session today. And without further ado, I would really like to turn it over to her. So please welcome with me our master teacher, soprano, Jane Marsh. Welcome, Jane.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. How nice to have you with us today. I want to give you a few words before we get into the master classing of this master class that I think would interest you. What gives the opera Romeo and Juliet its unique flavor is the duet music, interestingly enough, that Gounod wrote for the lovers to sing together. This is an opera of 4 duets, reminding all of us that the subject really in this opera is not the young lovers, but rather their unfolding love as a couple. It warrants noting that Charles Gounod was deeply religious, and he even thought and considered the priesthood. So the spirit and the soul of the music is very much paramount in this particular opera of his. Each of the lovers, Romeo and Juliet, wants to be aware that the highest aria projection is needed, as there is major, but I mean really major, competition with the 4 communal duets. So each soloist has a responsibility. And with that, I think we should introduce our Juliet. Juliet is going to be sung by Lily Arbitzer. The role of Juliet is an ingenue, a young maiden with indulged dreams of fantasy. Juliet does have a competitive challenge in her aria, but Juliet has it actually easier in her Act 1 aria because it has vocal movement and the possibility for physical movement as well to a really delightful waltz tempo. Hence, it's called the waltz aria. Juliet's aria is therefore assisted through the aria's extroversion. But the conscious attempt of the soprano, all of the sopranos who sing this role, to accept the challenge of high aria projection is still very much needed, and adds the necessary and memorable and competitive edge to the overall expression. And having said that, let's listen to Lily Arbitzer as she sings the first act aria of Juliet.
Hi, Lily. Hi, Jane.
Welcome back to the Guild. So nice to have you with us.
Thank you.
I want to just, before you start and do anything with this aria, I want to set up an idea in your mind. This aria and the tenor aria have to be excessively high projection because you are in competition not with him, but with 4 duets that you sing together. Basically, this entire opera is one long duet. So I say that, sing the aria all the way through once, and then we'll talk a little bit further. But give it as much high projection as you can. It's easiest for you. It's certainly easier than with a tenor, because he has something that's serene. You are singing a desire to be happy. And because it's a waltz, we want to have a feeling of an incredible, in spite of the activity and in spite of the ornamentation, it has to have an incredible sense of legato. So think about that, if you might, and then sing it.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Have fun?
Yes.
Good. Listen, when you sing those grace notes, ba-up, ba-up,
ba-da. Sing the second note longer. Ba-da, 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 da-dee-da-dee-da, ba-da, ba-da. It gives the legato. It also, you don't swallow the second note that way, which is a danger with every Juliet. But the whole entrance into the aria needs to be more effervescent. You have to realize she probably, not in every production, but likely, she has a group of people around her, the choristers. So she's selling her idea to the chorister. She's selling her idea of wanting to indulge in the dream of being in love. Little does she know that very soon she's going to meet the love of her life. So this has to be not just the beginning of an aria, but the beginning of a statement.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And when you go up to the high note at the end, hang on to it as long as you can, and then try your best to hold the last note until the orchestra stops with you. Now, if you don't think you can do it breath-wise, give it more pusta, more breath than you are, and make it longer, and then hold it until the chord changes, okay?
Okay.
All right. And with the melisma, with the fast note, it's all chromatic. Be very precise there if you can, because we can hear it. You know, we can hear it if it's just a little bit imperfection. Try and get it, yeah, bop, beep, bop, beep, bop, beep. We'll do it a couple of times slowly, and then you'll get it immediately.
Okay.
Want to try it?
Yeah.
Okay. Now sell it. Second note longer. Buddy.
Je veux vivre dans le rêve qui m'enivre. Ces jours encore douces flammes, je te garde dans mon âme comme trésor. Je veux vivre dans le rêve qui m'enivre. Ces jours encore douces flammes, je te garde dans mon âme comme trésor. C'est vrai.
Interrupt a second. When you get into what I call the B section, don't slow down.
Okay.
Just make a change of color and a change of dynamic. Don't get too soft, but make it very legato and very involved in what you're thinking, not what you're trying to sell. Okay? Maybe get a little bit into that with a couple of measures.
Douce flamme, je te garde dans mon âme comme trésor.
Now don't slow down.
Cette ivresse de jeunesse ne te délasse qu'un jour. Le l'ampleur, le corset de l'amour. Le bande fait son retour.
Very precise.
Je veux vivre dans le rêve qui m'enivre. Longtemps encore douce flamme, je te garde dans mon âme comme trésor. De l'hiver morose.
Just a change of color. Excuse me that I interrupt you. Just a change of color because Gounod has written the color that he wants.
Yeah.
And many sopranos try and slow it down to indicate the color. It's already on the page.
Great.
Okay?
Okay.
And when you go, excuse me that I interrupt again, we'll go back and do it a third time. When you go up to those high notes, remember people are interested in the color of your voice for this aria. They're interested in the effervescence of the aria, but they also want to hear the high notes. Those are your money notes. People have paid to hear them. So don't just sing them and then get off them.
Okay.
Sing them and then get off them, okay?
Sounds fun. Great. Same thing.
Don't swallow the second tone. You're doing fine, though. You picked it up immediately.
Okay.
But added to that, buddy, keep the legato. So it's not just ba-da, ba-da, but ba-da, 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 ya-dee-da-dee-da. So you have a whole phrase of that, okay? You understand what I'm trying to get at?
Yes, with the rest, but with the rest not interrupting the phrase.
Not interrupting it and make it an arc in the phrase.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yep.
Douce flamme, je te gardais dans mon âme,
Yes, better. Effervescent again. Get into it. Now sell it. Just sell it.
You feel like doing it again?
Yeah.
Yeah? Can you remember certain things that I said? I want to say in general, when you work on this aria alone or with your teacher, which you should, I would pay a lot of attention to those chromatic tones. Occasionally, it's just a hair, but it is something to be, it will be alleviated as soon as you know exactly where vocally where the tones are. I would work it so it doesn't go a little bit sharp.
Uh-huh.
More a little bit sharp than a little bit flat, but just a hair. It's like a half a hair, but it is noticeable to my ears because I know you can fix it instantly as soon as you have a visual idea of where the tones really sit and not just singing it by ear. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Having said that, do it now the way you do it, and let's enjoy it.
Okay, and my only other question, when you said at the very end to hold the high note, but then hold the final pitch all the way to the end?
Well, if you can, but if you
Okay.
can't, let it go before the chord changes, which is just before you held it just a little bit longer.
Yes, I noticed.
But you gave it a lot on top, and that's really important because you've gone up to a high D, and now you sell the aria with a high C.
Uh-huh.
And before that, you've been hitting high B flats all the time, which is a nice and a high tone, but that's not where you're going. You have more to give. Okay?
Yep. Great.
Give it a try. I'm going to stop you a second. I'm sorry. When you say ba ba da da ba ya, go toward that tone. Don't just sing it. Da 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 ya. And now we're going to go on with the rest of the aria. Lambaste it.
Okay.
That first high note, rather high note, and then go on.
Great.
This is like I'm announcing. Okay. Huh?
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm going to stop you a second. I'm sorry.
c'est de l'amour. Et les bonnes puissantes.
Ease into it. Again, ease into it.
Brava! Three things. Go through the actual waltz. Can you get a complete phrase with an arc later on when you're working on it alone? The others, the whole chromatic thing. Work on that a couple of times like you would do a gruppetto, you know, so you're sure where it lies and what it sounds like vocally. And then when you go up to the top note, sing it, beautifully sung, by the way. Sing it with a lot of vibrancy, and when you come down to the lower note, and you go off, give it a little button, because that's what ignites your public to not help themselves, but they have to stand up and scream.
Okay.
So don't just go, yeah, you know, listen to Pavarotti, he did it all the time.
Yeah.
You know? Bravo.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. How nice to see you, how nice to hear you.
Thank you.
Well, we move on to our Romeo, David Bailey. Romeo is our romantic male lead, and though Romeo's challenge is to find a chaste yet passionate tone that consciously describes the recitative that he has and the aria in a really bigger than life fashion, Romeo has the challenge of finding passion from a more modest tempo than our Juliet scene. The passion needs, with the Romeo aria, also in the recitative, to be expounded energy and spiritual glory, as it were, not just a singing exercise. In other words, the Romeo needs in the aria to find the tempo that he needs, but also it needs to have high wire energy, and then he needs to move into a quieter tempo, but still with the enormous expounded energy in order to compete with what comes after his aria. Juliet has the same thing, because after these arias, they are singing together, and it is constantly a sense of a crescendo in terms of passion, but it is always a sense of the arias having to compete with the duets. So having said all that, let's listen to our Romeo, David Bailey. David, welcome to the Guild. We're delighted to have you with us. Let's hear Act 2 aria from Romeo, please.
L'amour, l'amour, oui, son ardeur a troublé tout mon être. Mais quelle soudaine clarté resplendit à cette fenêtre. C'est là que dans la nuit rayonne sa beauté. Ah, lève-toi, soleil, fais pâlir les étoiles qui dans l'azur s'envolent, brille au firmament. Ah, lève-toi, ah, lève-toi, pareil, pareil, astre viril, charmant. Elle rêve, elle dénoue une boucle de cheveux qui vient caresser sa joue. Amour, amour, porte-lui mes voeux. Elle parle, qu'elle est belle, ah, je n'ai rien entendu, mais ses yeux parlent pour elle, et mon cœur a répondu. Ah, lève-toi, soleil, fais pâlir les étoiles qui dans l'azur s'envolent, brillent au firmament. Ah, lève-toi, ah, lève-toi, pareil, pareil, astre pur et charmant. Viens, Paris, astre pur et charmant. Viens, Paris, viens, Paris.
Bravo. Thank you very much. What I didn't say at the beginning, but you'll get it now, I usually let everybody
Go through the arias one time, and then we begin to talk. And then we will go through it another time, and maybe even a third time. You never know. What I think is important for Romeo to know about this is the same thing I happened to say to the Juliet. This is an opera that is based basically on 4 duets. It climbs in emotion and eroticism until the end. Even the last duet has all of that in it, even though they both die together. The reason I say this is because the arias, as beautiful as they are, cannot be sung in a passive way. They need to be sung with an incredible passionate engagement. So when you say l'amour, you're feeling the love that you're sensing with having met with her. And you're suddenly aware of the fact that you are so insatiable in love that you have to cry it out to the world, not just to yourself, but to everybody. So this whole thing has to have a high projection, a bigger than life use of the French language. And I must say, for American singers, particularly for American singers, French is not easy because of all of the various nasal vowels and muted vowels. But however you sing it, and I'm not implying that it's bad, but it needs to be much more transparent. We need to get l'amour, and it has to be rolled, not guttural. L'amour, you have to have a feeling of being able to step right into the language. And when you go up to the high notes, and I commend you for those, engage yourself with those. Careful with your engagement that you don't send yourself up a little bit, a half a hair sharp. It's better to be sharp than flat, I can tell you, because it's exhilarating and brilliant. But try it again, and then maybe I'll interrupt occasionally if I need to, okay?
L'amour,
Bigger than that.
l'amour, oui, son ardeur a troublé tout mon être.
Already better.
Mais quelle soudaine clarté resplendit à cette fenêtre.
Interrupt you a second. When you go into the second verse of the recitative, don't become passive.
Okay.
Is this really happening to me?
Okay.
Is this really happening to me? I'm feeling such love, I can't see my way out of it.
Yeah.
So it needs to be really high projection, and it needs to be not a mezzo piano, but a mezzo forte.
Okay. Okay.
Again from the beginning.
Sure.
L'amour, l'amour, oui, son ardeur a troublé tout mon être.
Now stay with the passion.
Mais quelle soudaine clarté resplendit à cette fenêtre.
Even more now.
C'est là que dans la nuit rayonne sa beauté. Ah, lève-toi, soleil.
Interrupt a second. The reason I asked you to do so much in the recitative is because the A lève-toi soleil has to have a sense of core, if you can understand what I mean, the inner core of the beauty of the tenor sound.
Okay.
In other words, it can't be just a big recitative and then you relax back and smoke a cigar and talk about how she inspires you with the stars and the world and so forth. It has to still have that feeling.
Okay.
And the engagement with the French language needs to be really high projection. So as much as you can pronounce without being Italian, I mean, it is a Latin language. It's just not Latin vowels, not Italian vowels or even Spanish vowels. It has to have a sense of huge romanticism, but the refinement of classicism.
Yeah.
Okay? Try the whole recitative and then the beginning of the aria, keeping the recitative in mind when you begin the aria.
Okay.
L'amour, l'amour, oui, son ardeur a oublie tout mon être.
And now lots of language. And keep the volume.
Mais quelle soudaine clarté resplendit à cette fenêtre. C'est là que dans la nuit rayonne sa beauté.
Now don't relax into the beauty of an aria. Give it, sell it as well, only with much more volume.
Ah, lève-toi, soleil, fais pâlir les étoiles.
Engage yourself.
Qui dans l'Asie sans voile brille au firmament.
And now give it.
Ah, lève-toi. Ah, lève-toi. Pareil astre pire, charmant. Elle rêve, elle dénoue.
I want to stop a second. Excuse me. When you get into the phrase we're right in, don't get lost and disappear with the interlude between the two phrases.
Okay.
Because what you want to do is pick up the phrase and accelerate just a little bit
Okay.
with language. Don't let it get too passive, and don't let yourself be passive in that interlude.
Okay.
Keep the interlude and then move it a little bit with tempo.
Okay.
Eric, if you could go back a little bit.
Yeah. The first one. Sure. Sure.
And then just explode at the end.
Ah, lève-toi.
Two.
Ah, lève-toi. Pareil astre pire, charmant.
And now stay present. Stay present. And now pick up the tempo slightly.
Elle rêve,
Tempo.
elle dénoue une boucle de cheveux qui vient caresser sa joue. Amour, amour, porte-lui mes voeux. Elle parle, qu'elle est belle. Ah, je n'ai rien entendu, mais ses yeux parlent pour elle, et mon cœur a répondu.
Don't get lost. Give it more than you gave the first time around.
Ah, lève-toi, soleil, fais pâlir les étoiles.
Tempo.
Qui dans l'asile sans voile brille au firmament.
And now accelerate the tempo.
Ah, lève-toi.
Keep going.
Ah, lève-toi. Pareil, astre pire, charmant.
So now you're hooked.
Viens, Paris, astre pire, charmant. Viens,
It's
a
just,
workout, right?
it's a little ditty.
It's a little ditty.
I was working with you. It's the point being, I don't know if I said this before, this is a competition, really, in order to really stand out as the tenor of the evening and the aria of the tenor of the evening. It has to have those kinds of elements, or it gets lost. Juliet has it a little easier than you because she has movement, and she can also move on stage. She can dance if she wants to. It really is a waltz. But you are standing there just ensconced in love. And so it has to come from inside you and with the various colors that you give us. Or the aria does not, or even her aria, does not become as important as the four duets that hold the relationship together. Because unlike the Shakespeare, where it talks about the politics between the Capulets and the Montagues, this has all to do, Gounod was very clever. He lets we're aware of the fact of the Capulets, we're aware of the Montagues because that's the story. But the whole essence of the story is your love. And so you have to get out there and indulge us with the fact that you're feeling it, boy.
Yeah.
Okay? Do you feel like doing it again?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. This time I'll try not to interrupt.
Okay.
It's very hard because I always have something that's happening. But just sing the heck out of it.
Okay.
L'amour, oui, son ardeur a troublé tout mon être. Mais quelle soudaine clarté resplendit à cette fenêtre. C'est là que dans la nuit rayonne sa beauté. Ah, lève-toi, soleil, fais pâlir les étoiles qui dans l'azur s'envolent, brillent au firmament.
Get the tempo slightly.
Ah, lève-toi.
Okay, that's number 2.
Ah, lève-toi.
Number 3.
Pareil, astre viril charmant.
Don't get lost. Stay engaged with the passion.
Elle rêve.
Pick up the tempo slightly.
Elle dénoue une boucle de cheveux qui vient caresser sa joue. Amour, amour, porte-lui mes vœux. Elle parle, qu'elle est belle, ah, je n'ai rien entendu.
Tempo.
Et ses yeux
an idea, because these dynamic changes and the use of the text and also the tempo changes will make the aria more plastic to the listener, because it is an aria where you don't do a whole lot of running around.
No.
It's not a ditty. It's a difficult aria to sing. Bravo, thank you.
Thank you.
So we move on to our Stefano Caligera. Stefano is Romeo's page, but it's important to know as an audience, also as a singer, I have to say, or singers, that this character is introduced only in Gounod's opera, Romeo and Juliet. The character is nowhere to be found in Shakespeare's play. The part is sung by a second soprano, and not a second soprano of less important, although it's a shorter role, but it is a role that is included in operas operatically, more or less as a matter of form, a little bit like there had to be a love story in Italian opera of the Romantic era. So it is a question of the way the operas were put together. And at Gounod's time, the role was known as a Dugazon role. This was an 18th century soprano who sang this repertoire a lot, so they named the repertoire after her. It basically is a pants role. We know what that is, a young girl with a dark colored voice dressed up as a man. This is a female singer, basically, so we understand this correctly, who is portraying a young man with a yet unchanged voice. And today, a mezzo-soprano is cast, and Caligera is a mezzo-soprano. And though the part is always cast with a quality singer, the size of Stefano is not to be compared with that of Romeo. Stefano is basically, it's depending upon the production, I have to say, Stefano and Romeo are not always to be seen together on stage. So the challenge of this role is something different than Juliet and Romeo. The challenge for the soprano, or in this case, the mezzo-soprano, Stefano, who is singing the role, is to give, number one, an apropos size of tone, show off the color of the mezzo sound in this role, an apropos body language. Remember, we have a female impersonating a male, and a highly enunciated French language. I mean, in the Baroque time, the French took away the acrobatics in Baroque arias so that they could understand the French. So the language in French operas is incredibly important. And in this particular case, it's important, all of those things I just mentioned, in order to make the role sufficiently memorable as a competition of the three major roles in our masterclass today. So let's hear Caligera sing Stefano.
Welcome, Kelly. Delighted to have you with us. We're going to go through Stefano's aria in the third act of Romeo. And what's important is the fact that we have an idea of Stefano from the first act, and he knows all about Romeo. So what's important, I think, is that the public needs to be very clear about who Stefano is and what he's doing, because those people who come to see Romeo and Juliet are usually well informed about the Shakespeare. So let's hear the aria, and then we'll go from there.
Depuis hier, je cherche en vain mon maître. Est-il encore chez vous, mes seigneurs Capulet? Mais à peu si vos dignes valets à ma voix se mettaient, oseront réparer tourterelle, rosserie de vautour, quelques jours déployant ton aile, et suivra les amours. Au vautour, il faut la bataille pour frapper des stocks et de taille. Leurs becs sont aiguisés. Les solas, ces oiseaux de proie, tourterelle qui fait ta joie, des amoureux baisers. Gardez bien la belle qui vivra verra votre tourterelle vous échappera. Votre tourterelle vous échappera. Arramier loin des verts bocages, par l'amour attiré, alentour de ce nid sauvage, je crois soupirer. Les vautours sont à la querelle, leur chanson qui fait s'étirer résonne qu'à grand prix. Cependant, leur douce ivresse n'ose côte leur tendresse aux astres de la nuit. Gardez bien la belle qui vivra verra votre tourterelle vous échappera. Votre tourterelle vous échappera. Gardez bien la belle, votre tourterelle vous échappera.
Brava! So, from the first act, we understand, I said this just, I intimated it before, we understand, if we've read the playbill, that Stefano is the page of Romeo and helped Romeo get up on the balcony in the Act 1 meeting when they've fallen in love at the party. We've gone through 2 acts. We're now in the 3rd act, and Stefano is alone on stage, and it's as though, quite frankly, that Romeo he hasn't seen Romeo for some time. So he knows that Romeo has been occupying himself with Juliet, and he basically, a whole aria is tongue-in-cheek. I know something you don't know, and he's basically thumbing his nose at the Montagues, because Romeo is involved with Juliet, and she with him, and you're the only one who really knows the lay of the land, right?
Yeah.
So let's hear it again, and I'm going to give you a couple of tips. You need very much, because this character's not involved in the Shakespeare, paint it in red, so to speak, for the public. There you are. You're
Oh,
dressed.
good.
All of it's perfect. Paint it in big strokes for the public so we understand what real role you have in this opera, and you're just not somebody that they happen to see cross the stage and help in the Act 1 and help Romeo get on the balcony.
Okay.
So make it clear, also in the tone of the way you sing. Don't start it, even though you're on the street, let's say you're on the street alone, because in various productions it's different. Start it with a tone that is big enough so that you become memorable to the entire public. Start the recitative with a big enough tone so that when you then go into the aria, which is often sung taking your sword and strumming it like a guitar, Depends on the director, of course, but that's not a bad idea to keep that in mind, because then it has a feeling of singing an aria, basically. The whole thing needs to be kicked up a notch. So one, we become very aware of what Stefano knows, even though we've seen him help Romeo in the first act, and also what's really going on, and the fact that you're basically laughing at the other group of people, at the Montagues. You're laughing at them. I know something you don't know, and she's going to fly away from you people, and she's going to be in love, and it's going to be a wonderful thing. Because all of those things that are in the music, beep bop, beep bop, beep bop, the two tones together, they basically are, they're laughing. It's laughing music.
Yes.
I'm sure you've thought about that. Yeah. So keep it up a little bit in volume,
Sure.
all the way through, and keep the tempo. And if I have to start to interrupt you a little bit, you won't mind.
Oh, not at all.
Good.
De poésière, je cherche en vain ma maître. Est-il encore chez vous, mes seigneurs capilés?
Already better.
Keep going.
Already better. Go ahead.
Okay.
Voilà à peine si vos dignes valets à ma voix ce matin oseront reparaître.
I'm going to interrupt you when you say "pare." I wouldn't go "pare."
Okay. Sure.
So it makes a statement, and then you can start.
Okay.
Try it again. Go back a couple of measures.
Uh-huh.
Voyons un peu si vos dignes valets à ma voix ce matin oseront reparaître.
Better and more memorable. That's what makes it fun, the music. And now begin. Na 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 na.
Que fait-il, blanche tourterelle, rosée de vautour, quelques jours déployant ton aile, désirant les amours. Au vautour, il faut la bataille pour frapper des sauts de taille. Leurs becs sont déguisés.
Now don't slow down, just another color.
Laisse-moi ces oiseaux de proie, tourterelle qui fait ta joie, des amoureux baisers.
And now out, sell it.
Gardez bien la belle qui vivra verra votre tourterelle vous échappera. Votre tourterelle vous échappera.
Keep occupied in the interludes.
Arrabie loin des verbocages, l'amour attiré à l'entour de ce nid sauvage. Ah, je crois soupirer. Les vautours sont à la querelle, leur chanson qui fait s'étirer résonne à grande pluie.
Don't slow down.
Leur douce ivresse, mots à ma côte, leur tendresse aux astres de la nuit.
Lots of text now.
Gardez bien la belle qui vivra verra votre tourterelle vous échappera.
Keep going.
Votre tourterelle.
I'm going to interrupt you. The reason I talk to you is because I want you started ba 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 la 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 la. Stay up there.
Great.
People have been waiting. Even though this is not a part where you have to necessarily show off the voice, you still want to show off the voice.
Okay.
I mean, it's not as though you're the romantic lead, but you are making a statement as a character that's not existent in the Romeo and Juliet by Shakespeare. So make it bigger than life, and when you have a note like that up there as a mezzo, use it,
Okay.
okay? So start a little bit before.
Sure. Gardez bien.
Gardez bien la belle. Votre tourterelle. Vous échappera.
Beautiful, thank you. I would suggest with the last phrase, ba be ba, what is it? What's the last
Vous
phrase? Say it again.
échappera.
Yeah. Give it a little, once you've gone up to the high tone, don't make the tone less important, the tones afterwards. Give them as much, even though they're in the lower register of the voice, give them as much emphasis as if you were at the top of the range. And at the end, because it ends kind of down and in the middle of the voice, give it a kick. Ah!
Ah.
Because that, I mean, I say this to all singers because it's important, particularly for romantic leads. But with an aria like this, where you're basically all by yourself on stage, laughing at the opposition, at the Montagues, and saying the turtle love here is going to leave you and we're going to move on, you know, make it clear that that it's all in jest and that you wish that the two of them, meaning Romeo and Juliet, will get together. One way to inspire the public to be with you is to end the aria with a kick at the end.
Okay.
Okay, try
Yeah.
it. That's over, I've over-talked it, but you basically understand what I mean. Don't just let it stop.
Yeah, like.
Let it stop, you know?
Uh-huh.
Okay, try it again.
Okay.
Gardez bien la belle. Votre tourterelle.
Important.
Vous échappera.
Much better. And the public will remember it much better. Otherwise it gets lost in the whole bri of orchestra. Do you feel like trying it again?
Yeah.
It was markedly better. And part of it was better because you were involved in the character and involved in the volume of the character. But always, all three of these characters, even the two leads, have to compete. I say this to all of you, but it's really true. You don't have to be involved with duets, but the duets involve all of you because they're the whole opera.
Right.
This is an opera. It's basically one big duet.
Yeah.
You know? So, in order to make, even the Romeo and Juliet, with their arias, they have to make themselves extremely important. Or the duets outweigh them, even though the public enjoys the beautiful music. So, make yourself the greatest mezzo in the world, the greatest Stefano in the world, the greatest soprano Juliet, the greatest Romeo in the world, so that it becomes bigger than life. And it will then compete with the rest of the opera. That sounds silly, but there seldom is an opera that's built on the crescendo of one mood to another mood, to a third mood, to a fourth mood of a duet. Because this whole opera is a duet. I mean, different degrees of a duet, but nevertheless. So you, mixed into the whole thing, know about it all. And you're going to tell the world all by yourself on stage, as if to say, tongue-in-cheek, I know what's going to happen, watch out. So give it some grandeur, okay?
Sure.
Depuis hier, je cherche en vain mon maître. Est-il blanche tourterelle, rosserie de vautour,
Lots of text.
quelques jours déployant en aile, désirant les amours. Aux vautours sont à la bataille pour frapper des stocks et de taille. Leurs becs sont aiguisés.
Now, very intimate, but not soft.
Laisse-la ces oiseaux de proie, tourterelle qui fait ta joie, des amoureux baisers.
Laugh at the world.
Gardez bien la belle qui vivra verra votre tourterelle vous échappera. Votre tourterelle vous échappera.
Don't get too slow.
Par amis loin des verts bocages, l'amour attiré à l'entour de ce nid sauvage. Je crois soupirer. Les vautours sont à la querelle, leur chasseur qui fait s'étirer résonne à grand prix. Cependant, leur douce ivresse, nos amants conteneurs tendresse aux astres de la nuit. Gardez bien la belle qui vivra verra votre tourterelle vous échappera.
Now have fun.
Votre tourterelle vous échappera. Gardez bien la belle, votre tourterelle
Make it big.
vous échappera.
How about? Better. Much better.
Thank you.
Have fun with it. How nice to have had you with us.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. That was wonderful. At this time, I am going to begin to ask our artists to join us in our Q&A session, I believe. So if artists, if you could go ahead and turn on your cameras and join us. Thank you. So I'm going to hand this over to Jane. She has some pre-prepared questions, and then we will jump into questions from the audience. And so audience members, if you have questions, go ahead and you can type them into the Q&A feature now, and we'll get to them soon. So Jane, take it away.
Thank you so much. I want to address, let's start from the top. We started with Juliette. Let me address a question to Lily Arbisser. Lily, are you there?
Yes,
Good. How nice to see you again today.
lovely to see you too.
Talk to me about exuberant arias. And the reason I'm asking this question is because generally your voice category brings in a lot of exuberance. You sing Despina and Così fan tutte, you sing this aria, you sing various arias that are frothy young maidens. And in this particular aria, although we didn't do it in the master class because of the COVID, but on stage, it very often is an aria that not only has vocal exuberance and vocal movement, but also physical movement. And the question is, how would you prepare when you're starting to learn a piece like this? How would you prepare of proportioning your energy, your vocal energy and your physical energy in order to make this aria convincing on stage?
Cool. What a question. Okay. So I think the way that I try to work most of the time, and particularly with an aria that is like this, which is so waltz heavy, like why are those rests there, for example? I think the rests are you know, je, the, he, because she could be dancing around the room with her nurse, sort of watching her, prepping for this event, you know, kind of thinking about the experience of being at this ball in her own mind. And so if I were going to work on it at home, the way that I would prepare it would be to actually embody that waltz movement around the room, both with speaking the text and also then with singing through. So it wouldn't be a static experience for me, and was not a static experience as I was preparing it, because it has the dance in the piece. So one needs to be prepared, as you say, for that movement. I don't know if that answers the question, but.
No, it does answer the question, but there's another part to the question. It is because there is a certain amount of, I mean, you have to be able to hear the orchestra and see the conductor. So it's unlikely that the director is going to ask you to dance while you're singing. He may ask you to dance when you're not singing in the interludes or so forth, so that you can somehow bring that into the whole characterization. But it is important to know that dancing can sometimes leave a singer breathless, which means that it's hard to find your way through the aria. So it means that you have to earnestly practice these two things in order to make both convincing, don't you think?
I think that's true. It sort of reminds me of Monica's waltz in the Menotti opera. The same thing, I found myself dancing on my own when I was self-directing, and the problem is you do end up breathless. So I think, as you say, as you so rightly pointed out, you kind of have to find the moments where you can kind of take the movement as a separate event from the singing. I just like to practice them together in order to feel the music, but not necessarily as an aerobic event.
Eurythmic event, actually. Yeah, and I had asked you to feel the da-dee, the second note. This will lead you also into a sense of waltz, because of course it is a waltz called Juliet's Waltz. It helps to get into that whole waltz thing without having to feel like you're jerking your way around stage. You know, it can be it is one of the memorable pieces of the opera because it is such a beautiful, in every competition you hear some singer sing this Juliet's Waltz, but in the context of the opera, the hints that I gave you are appropriate because it has to be memorable in terms of the entire context of the opera. So you do have an advantage over the rest of the characters in that you can dance, and that's also memorable. So I wanted to just say there are other things that you sing, but that have sort of movement in them. But this is one where you really do have the opportunity to dance, hence the question.
Thanks.
Right. I want to get, if there's anybody who wants to suddenly interject a question, please do so. If not, I'm going to move on to David Bailey, who's our Romeo. I want to ask David if he feels a sense of tempo and rhythm between recit and aria, and whether it helps you as a singer, particularly in this particular aria. The energy and the passion as a prerequisite for Romeo's aria is necessary generally, but to proportion it between the recitative and the aria is terribly important. One, so that it becomes bigger than life, but two, so that it doesn't become static and just one color. So in working an aria like this, because it's not at all easy to sing, neither is Juliet's, one has to have a feeling of plan. You have to have a plan so that you know just how much to give at certain moments in this aria. One of the things that can help you is tempo, and I mentioned that in the masterclass, but also in preparation. How far in advance do you start to prepare? And what is your general plan in everyday practice in order to prepare for an aria like this, or for an entire role like this?
Well, the recit is interesting to me because it in so many ways it's rather short. It's just 3 phrases in a way, but there's so much in it, and when it's done correctly, and as you said, it builds. It sets up the aria in a way that it just feels natural, that of course I'm going to go, levatoire, like that comes out of the recit if it's done right. and there's just so much of it in there. And what's interesting to me about most of the aria, but even the rest of it too, is that so much of the action, I mean, as you said, it's very still for me. It's all about what she's doing up on the balcony. I'm seeing her move, I'm seeing the sun come up. And so it's having that be my focus is challenging. As you said, Julia, there's much more motion in that music. This reminds, it's very Faust-like, where you're singing to the house. I mean, it's beautiful music, but there has to be so much inner happenings going on that's the trick for me. And it can't be, I can't jump around so much. It really has to come, as you said, from me, from a deep place. And in terms of how to prepare for that, I mean, I do for this masterclass or any performance, it's a lot of physical work. It's getting down on the floor, find a yoga mat, and really find that place so that it's not, all here up. It comes from that low place. It comes from your core and your lower support and your sense of the ground, sense of all of it.
It is true that an opera singer is basically an athlete. And we need to remember that, because the body is the instrument. It's not like carrying a cello on your back or a piano that's rolled into the room. You are your instrument. So you've got to keep it in shape. And one of the ways to do that is to eat and sleep and move healthily. But I have another question. How soon when you're generally preparing a role like this, how much in advance do you begin to learn it? I ask this question because these days, and I'm making a general statement and there are lots of exceptions to the rule, I find that many singers, and this is not an implication that you're one of them, but it is a tendency today to start too late to learn things. One has to very often start a year, if not 2 years in advance, to start to learn roles. And if you don't know what roles are going to be offered to you, not you particularly, but one, it's good to imagine the kinds of roles that will be offered to you and begin to learn them. It's a lot of self-motivation. But generally speaking, I find that many singers bank on their intuition. Now, intuition can do wonderful things for you, but if it isn't first an intellectual learning and then intuitive, the intuitive can let you down. So I wonder how long in advance, how much time in advance do you begin to learn a role generally? And some roles, you probably add even time to that. How long do you plan, or have you planned to learn Romeo?
That's a great question. So especially for this, I mean, obviously this is an aria I've sung off and on for a while. In terms of role study, we first talked about doing this masterclass. I know with COVID, it got kicked a few times. I made this kind of a project for myself to do a whole role study. I took sections of it to coaches on Zoom, just like this, because it's one thing to know the aria, but it's another thing to know it in the context, what comes before of it, not just dramatically, but in terms of pacing. You've got the Act 1 duet that leads into this, that leads into the Act 2 duet, which is a long one there. So it's knowing where it fits in context. So I would say for me, for this one, that was maybe 6 to 8 months before was when we first started talking about this masterclass. And it's a lot of score study, a lot of drilling the language, the rhythm, making sure that is ready to go before I even take it to a coach pianist to put the pitches and rhythms with it. And also to take it to somebody that's going to help me with the physicality, help me with the body work, a movement person, plus the voice lessons, so, I mean, I don't think a year or two is unreasonable when possible. And we always have roles in the back that we're working on ahead of time.
Right. And if you put something, you start something and then put it away, when you bring it back, it's like taking a couple of days away from the gym. Suddenly you're better at it than you were the first time.
Right.
Well, I don't think your 6 and 8 months is modest at all. I think it's terrific. I want to ask Kelly Guerra some questions. Kelly, are you there?
Yes.
Good. Hi, nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
I want to ask you a little bit about the French language. Talk about high wire focus and language and rhythm and vocal tone in singing Stefano. In other words, and I commend you for singing way up at the top of the voice and holding it as long as you did, particularly in the third session. I think you surprised yourself. but it was fun. It was fun, and it was well sung. But talk to me about Highwire focus on language, rhythm, and vocal tone in singing Stefano, and making him bigger than life, bigger than you think he needs to be, maybe, in order to make him memorable to the public and memorable to people who are perhaps interested in what you can do with that general repertoire of the pants rolls. Give us a little idea.
Sure. In terms of the language, of course, speaking the text without any rhythm or any music, and really knowing what it means, and really finding the verbs and the action words, right? There's a lot of descriptive text in Stefano's aria, you know, saying "watch out" and the thrust of the sword. There's a lot of onomatopoeias, and it's really rich. So starting there, of course, and then making it sound natural. Luckily, Gounod is a fantastic composer, and it's not very hard to fit the rhythm of the language onto the notes and the rhythm that is written by Gounod. So it's making sure that those are aligned, and ultimately really adding flair and my own personal words that I find interesting, or I want to highlight with volume or change in dynamics, or perhaps more physicality.
Oh, do you find, just one last question, because I want to ask Eric a couple of questions too. Do you find the fact that you are Spanish speaking as a first language and it is a Latin language, do you find that helps you at all in understanding the French? Mind you, French pronunciation is different than all the Latin languages, but do you find that it was helpful to you in being able to feel your way into the meaning of the words?
Oh, yes. I feel so lucky that I was raised in a Spanish speaking home. So a lot of the roots of the words are the same. I found when I was in French class, I'd be like, I know what that word means just from the first 4 letters.
Right.
So yes, it does really make the learning process a lot faster. But I think going through the school system, the conservatory system, especially since we're taking French, German, and Italian, well, maybe not so much German, but when you're speaking French and Italian, you find words that sound similar or cognates, and your knowledge accumulates.
Well, you may find yourself singing a German role because the composer with a top like yours, the composer's not out of the realm of possibility. I wish it for you. And thank you.
I hope so too.
Thank you for joining us today. Eric, I want to ask you a couple of questions about musical preparation, generally because we're running smallly out of time. And coaching singers in this opera, which basically, of course, is in 1867, and so therefore it is very definitely after the bel canto period, but it is during the Romantic period. And it is not a classical piece per se, but it needs to have a certain classicism, meaning a sense of organization and a certain form, as well as having the passion of Romanticism. How do you, in 3 sentences, how do you bring your singers as a group into finding the right colors and the right rhythm and the right tone for this opera?
Well, I think the main thing to remember is that Gounod was actually criticized by a lot of people in France, the French critics, for being too Germanic. And he studied with Berlioz. That was a huge influence on his life. And there's a certain Germanic quality even within the French language that makes it a little bit more declamatory than, say, the music of Massenet, which came a little bit later, or other French composers from that era.
But I have to say he was a great influence on those other composers, including Massenet and Fauré and Debussy. He didn't reach, after he left and came back from England, he didn't have the renommée that he'd had before he left, but he was very influential on the composer that followed him.
Yes, definitely.
Eric, thank you so much for doing such a splendid job today. I'm always glad to have you with me. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Great, and we have an audience question that I'm going to give to the group. Someone from our audience is asking, how do you accent and stress the consonants in the French lyrics? And they're asking specifically in Stefano's aria.
Well, then I'm going to let Stefano speak for herself. Kelly, give us a word. Did she hear us?
Yes, sorry, I was just looking for my mute button. So the French language, what I've learned in school is that it's a very liquid language, and the accents and especially the unstressed syllables are not so stressed. So like Eric was saying, it is a lot more Germanic, so perhaps a bit easier to stress words when they shouldn't be. So it's just focusing on the legato line that helps the aria move forward and sound as French as possible.
I have to say just one word about that. The French language also has certain liaisons, combining words that you have to do, some that you are not allowed to do at all, and some are just up for grabs. And I think that this makes it an incredible conversation piece among French singers particularly, but also the rest of the world. And it makes it difficult on foreigners because we're not exactly sure, some of us, even if you speak French well, exactly what's accepted and not accepted. But generally speaking, French is one of the most difficult languages to sing in. And I have to say this in all respect to French artists, it is also difficult for French singers. It is because of the changes of the, not that they're all having trouble with it, but it is something where they all have to invest time, to say nothing of the rest of the world, in order to sing the French language well. And so that's something for our public to know. I want to thank everybody for having joined us today.
Yes, thank you all. Thank you to our artists. Thank you to our community of learners for joining us online. This has been really lovely, and our first masterclass actually of our season. We have a couple more coming up this season, so if you enjoyed today, we'd love to have you again. Check out online at metguild.thinkific.com to look at our upcoming schedule. And just a reminder that we're recording today, so we're going to take this recording, give us a few days because we're going to caption it, and then we're going to put that recording back live in the Thinkific platform. I'll email you when that's ready, and that video will stay up there for another 72 hours. So if you want to revisit anything at any point, you just really loved an aria and you want to see one of your favorite singers here sing it and perform it again, you have that opportunity. Otherwise, we hope to see you again in the future, and thanks all for joining us on this Sunday from wherever in the world you currently are, and be well and have a great day.
Bye.